focus of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
I'm sure that most of you've heard the news by now that Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury have agreed to terms. They've agreed to a financial split for not only the first fight, but the subsequent rematch. It's 50-50 for the first fight and 60-40 for the second fight. 60 to the winner, 40 to the loser. I saw the immediate reactions to this news, and I didn't rush to make a video as the news itself seems largely premature to me. I saw that there were many that treated this story as cause for celebration.
Is it really?
I think it's far too early to get excited. A lot of things must come to pass. A lot of stars have to align before we get to that point where Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua is a reality. Bob Arum himself acknowledged that in his latest set of comments regarding this news. Per a tweet from Steve Kim, Bob Arum on the Fury-Joshua 2-fight deal, and a lot has to happen before this becomes a reality. If they get by those fights, we would do 2 fights next year, 50-50 and 60-40 to the winner. That's as far as we've gone. That's as far as we're at.
We haven't signed contracts because there's still things to be worked out, but...
I mean, it's good news, don't get me wrong, it is good news. But you heard it. They haven't signed contracts. Nothing is finalized here. Whatever terms they've agreed to, they have agreed to in principle, not on paper. So how far out are we really from this fight, as there's enough work needs doing on both sides of the spectrum? You look at the Tyson Fury, Bob Arum top-ranked side of things, and that Dillian White situation is going to need reconciliation. Bob Arum, he wants to skip the guy altogether, but that's not what Eddie Hearn just said. Verbatim, Eddie Hearn says, we have the Dillian White mandatory, which is due before this fight. Before this fight, meaning before this Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight.
Gotta sort that out.
You then look at the Anthony Joshua side of things. He's got one mandatory challenger via the IBF he's about to lock horns with in Kubrat Pulev, but provided he makes it past that guy, like many of us are expecting him to, he still has the winner of Chisora versus Usyk to contend with. And the Usyk people are standing firm. They're not conceding to stepping aside and waiting their turn. That's not the talk that's coming from their side of things.
You're gonna have to sort that out too.
So while here and now we have a rough draft of the deal's structure, 50-50 for the first fight, 60-40 for the second fight.
Yeah.
A lot must come to pass, and a lot of stars have to align before this fight becomes a reality.
And you know, the structure of that deal, always the most difficult part of any deal, is the financial element of that deal. And I believe we're in a great place where both guys have basically agreed on what that deal should be.
It is true that the finances of a deal are often a stumbling block that determines whether a fight does or doesn't happen. I mean, we see what happened with Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder.
That shit.
What the consequence of not being able to agree to terms can have on a fight. That the situation can drag on for so long that one guy or both guys might end up taking losses they have to bounce back from. Then it becomes a different conversation entirely. So that Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua have at least agreed to terms in principle, it is encouraging, though it's hardly the only mountain to climb, hardly the only obstacle to overcome. Fury's got to make it past Wilder, again. Joshua's got to make it past Pulev. Then afterwards, Tyson Fury's got to sort out that situation with Dillian White. Anthony Joshua's got to sort out that situation with the winner of Usyk versus Chisora.
That shit.
Then perhaps, if we're lucky, sometime in the third or fourth quarter of 2021, maybe we get this fight. But I'll tell you now, it's a bit premature to get out the confetti, because we're not there yet. Far from it. Not even close.
That's why I wasn't in a rush to make a video about it.
So the boys have agreed to a 50-50 split for the first fight and a 60-40 split for the second fight.
Sound familiar?
Similar situation to Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury's current situation. One might feel so inclined to ask, given the history of Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder's failed set of negotiations that lasted a very long time, why is it that with Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua is willing to concede half the pot, whereas with Deontay Wilder,
Fuck no.
Team Joshua was largely unwilling? What happened? What changed? What's the difference in these two situations?
Well, do you know how much time has passed?
It's been approximately 3 years. That's right. It's been 3 years since Deontay Wilder first started making that demand.
That's how long it's been.
And 3 years ago, that demand made absolutely no sense.
Not back then.
Based on what Wilder was earning at the time, his then marquee value. Where the hell do you get off that these guys are supposed to give you half?
Are you out of your mind?
I mean, he must have been at that time, because 3 years ago, that demand didn't make any fucking sense. You can't have any real intention of making this fight in a timely fashion when you have that kind of a demand given what your earning power was, as opposed to what it is today. I was of the opinion that by Deontay Wilder making that demand at that time, what he was really trying to do was stall, because you can't make a demand like that given what your marquee value is here and now with any hopes of making the fight in a timely fashion. Thus, if you're making that demand and sticking to it, it's because you're stalling, and you're stalling so that you can bide your time and raise your marquee value in the process while riding the wave that is this fight.
That's what he was doing.
Fight's obviously got a buzz around it, and what you're hoping to do is to use that buzz to raise your own marquee value so that at some point in the future, the demand will make a little bit more sense.
Assuming you ever even wanted this fight.
Which, even now, is a concept that I wrestle with, given how uncooperative the Deontay Wilder people have been the last 3 years. Better still, that was my take on that demand. 3 years ago, that demand makes no sense. So if you're making it, it's as a stall tactic. It's just that stall tactic,
Well,
in some ways it worked, and in some ways it didn't. Deontay Wilder's profile has grown since then. It has. His earning power has also grown since then. It's just that with that, things have gone sideways. It has backfired for Wilder. He's not the WBC champion anymore. And unless he can get that belt back, he's not a part of that conversation. Thus, whatever effort went into building up this fight for the last 3 years and riding that wave, it's all come crashing down. Suddenly, the synergy that was around Joshua versus Wilder is now around Joshua versus Fury, because Fury beat you. In essence, the synergy around one fight has been transferred to another.
3 years of build-up.
Flushed right down the fucking drain. It's because Tyson Fury ended up being a cherry pick. Gone wrong. Terribly wrong for Wilder. I've been telling you the whole time. They didn't pick Tyson Fury because they thought he was all in his prime and he's at his best. They picked that guy because they knew he was on the rebound. He was recovering from drug addiction and mental health issues, obesity. The opportune time to take this guy's at least that's how they looked at it.
It all went sideways.
Suddenly, the 3 years of buildup that went into the next undisputed heavyweight title fight was transferred from Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua to Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. The undisputed heavyweight title fight has had time to build. Enough time to where not only Deontay Wilder raised his marquee value, but Tyson Fury did as well. You gotta think about it. 3 years ago, Wilder asking for a 50-50 split, that didn't make sense.
Not back then.
But the fight, the undisputed heavyweight title fight, it's had 3 years to build. And by the time 2021 rolls around, that third or fourth quarter, it will have had that much more time to build to where it makes sense for both guys to have an even split. And that's how you can explain this recent development. That's how you can explain how Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury could come to terms for an even split for both fighters.
Where Wilder and Joshua could not.
Another thing about the fight is, both Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua's fans are the kind of fans that are actually willing to travel. You could stage that fight here at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and the Brits are going to fly out to see it. You could stage this fight in Saudi Arabia, and if they've got to go there to see it, they'll do it.
They will.
A good number of them. In that situation, you have two guys who are bringing the paying public to the fight regardless of where the fight takes place. Whereas with Wilder, yes, it was a little different. If Wilder versus Joshua were happening in Saudi Arabia, how many of these guys you see on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube? How many of these guys do you think would have flown out to fucking Saudi Arabia to support their guy Wilder?
How many?
If the fight were in the United Kingdom, how many of these guys do you think would have attended? How many of these guys do you think would have got their passport out, jumped on a plane to support their guy Wilder if the fight were in the United Kingdom? Hell, I'll go as far as saying if the fight were here in America at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, how many of these guys do you honestly believe
Would have came out.
would have traveled cross-country to see that fight?
Here in the States.
In all honesty, you can't get a good number of these guys to pay to see the fight from the comfort of their own home. Good number of these guys are members of the Fire Stick Committee, the Dream Stream crew. I hate to break the news to you, but that kind of stuff matters.
It's important.
In order for you to ask for an even split with a cash cow like Anthony Joshua, you've got to be a cash cow yourself.
To some degree.
You've got to have the kind of fans, the kind of support, to where no matter where the fight is staged, your guys are going to show up to root you on and support you. And Wilder, even here today, doesn't have that. Whereas with Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, the both of their fans are located in the same region of the world. More so, the both of their fans are the kind of fans that are actually willing to travel. So you have some peace of mind that regardless of where you stage the fight, it is still going to draw a crowd. It's simple, really. In order for you to ask for an even split, you've got to be able to bring to the table what the other guy's bringing to the table. And that's not the case with Wilder, but that is the case with Tyson Fury. So, this news, while premature, it is encouraging, it is. As I stated earlier, there are more mountains to climb, more obstacles to overcome when it comes to Joshua versus Fury, and it's far too soon to start celebrating what is an agreement in principle. Moving on to a disappointing piece of news that came out yesterday. Lou DiBella says Regis Prograis is not fighting Maurice Hooker at 147 pounds. The former WBO junior welterweight champion just doesn't want to face Prograis at a catch weight of 143 pounds anymore. According to what Brian McIntyre, Hooker's trainer, told Sports Illustrated Chris Mannix on Wednesday, Hooker only wants to reschedule their fight if the contracted maximum is the welterweight limit of 147 pounds. Lou DiBella, Prograis' promoter, told BoxingScene.com that Prograis will not agree to fight Hooker at 147 pounds. Prograis still considers himself a 140-pound fighter, and he begrudgingly agreed to fight Hooker at 143 only because the 5'11" Hooker contended that he couldn't get closer to 140 pounds. My guy is not a welterweight. Once he goes up to welterweight, that's where he's going to stay. But he has unfinished business with Josh Taylor and Jose Ramirez, and we thought Maurice Hooker, and people signed contracts. It used to be that signed contracts meant something. We have said no to anything, really. But my guy is not taking the fight at a weight he doesn't want to fight at. Regis is not going to 147 pounds to fight Maurice Hooker. The 30-year-old Hooker weighed in at 144.5 pounds for his last fight, a first-round technical knockout victory over Mexico's Uriel Perez on December 20th at the Talking Stick Resort Arena in Phoenix. It's the only fight he's had since losing the WBO title to Jose Ramirez. New Orleans Prograis hasn't fought since Josh Taylor beat him in Prograis' last fight.
That was in October of last year.
Now, this is very disappointing because I was very much looking forward to this fight. This was supposed to be one of the first fights DAZN USA, Matchroom USA, was going to put on as we transition out of this pandemic. But it appears that the wait was far too long for the fight to come off for Maurice Hooker. Maurice Hooker, who was already struggling to make 140 pounds. I think that his struggles with the weight, given his very generous physical proportions for junior welterweight, are a part of the reason he looked lethargic in the LePierre fight. There was something visibly wrong with Maurice Hooker in that fight, and I have no doubts struggling to make the weight might have had something to do with it. It's also possible that his struggles to make the weight affected his punch resistance in the Jose Ramirez fight. I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility as well. Whatever the case, the fight is off, folks.
Until further notice.
And looking at this thing, while it might have been Maurice Hooker and his team that decided that this fight doesn't happen unless it happens at welterweight. It's Maurice Hooker and his team that are going to be facing a scarcity of opponents from here on out. We all know who dominates most of the action in the welterweight division. That's the PBC stable of fighters. And unless you're one of those fighters,
Frozen out.
you yourself are going to face a scarcity of opponents. As it stands, Maurice Hooker, he's a Matchroom USA guy.
Yeah.
So the question then becomes, well, what are the odds that a Matchroom USA guy who's attempting to integrate himself into the welterweight division can land a fight with an Errol Spence, a Keith Thurman, a Danny Garcia?
Fat fucking chance.
I mean, we see how much luck Terrence Crawford is having with that. He's a fucking world champion. They're not interested in beating him and taking his belt. So how much luck is Maurice Hooker supposed to have in that situation? Ultimately, it might have been Maurice Hooker that decided to walk away from this Regis Prograis fight for one reason or another, but it's Regis Prograis who walks away from this thing in a more favorable position, as Regis Prograis' pool of options was not limited to Maurice Hooker. Good fight that would have been. Regis can always have a fight with
who?
Ivan Bedenchik, the former IBF champion who's coming off a victory. That fight is more than an adequate substitute for this fight, what was to be Hooker versus Prograis. Bedenchik versus Prograis has the same potential to be an all-action firefight that the Hooker fight had. And that's not all, folks. They could always conjure up Pablo Cano, the same Pablo Cano that beat the brakes off of Jorge Linares when he decided to move up to 140 pounds. Comparatively, Regis is certainly more adequately suited to lock horns with a Pablo Cano than Jorge was, and the fight itself also has the same potential to become a firefight that the Hooker fight had. You've got names floating around like Jose Zapata, Mario Barrios, Louis Ritson. Essentially, Regis is in a better position comparatively than Maurice, even though it was Maurice that made the decision to walk away from this fight. In truth, I'm not in a hurry to assign blame. Even though there is blame to be assigned, better still, I'm not flying off the handle, because had COVID-19 not shut everything down, we would have got this fight. But for Maurice Hooker, the wait was simply too long.
He outgrew the division.
That's what happened to this fight, and that's what's been happening to Maurice Hooker. He got too big to make 140 pounds healthy. It's just that now that he's moving up, I don't know what the hell he's going to do. Regis Prograis won't struggle to secure opponents in all the ways that Maurice Hooker will. So you're moving up to welterweight. Cool. Who are you going to fight? When a reigning world champion in Terrence Crawford struggles to secure the big names at the weight, what are the odds that Maurice Hooker's going to have more luck than he's having? Seems to me that, one way or another, Maurice Hooker is caught between a rock and a hard place. You've eliminated your struggle to make the weight, but now you're going to struggle with finding opponents.